Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really high-stakes political gamble unfolding in Brazil. You see, with the 2026 election just around the corner, the right wing is talking about a pretty controversial choice for its leader. And the strategy behind it? Well, it reveals a fascinating and very complex plan for the future of the whole conservative movement. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll set the stage with the power vacuum that kicked this whole thing off. Then, we'll look at the two big choices the right is facing. After that, we'll really get into the nitty-gritty of the strategy they're proposing, see how it holds up against the actual data, and wrap up by asking, what's really on the line here? All right, so to really get this strategy, you have to start with the core problem. We need to understand the one singular event that put all these political chess pieces in motion in the first place. And here it is. The one central, unchangeable fact is this. Jair Bolsonaro, who is without a doubt the leader and face of Brazil's right wing, cannot legally run for president in 2026. A court ruling basically took the most powerful piece on the board right out of the game for his side. Now, this isn't just about a leadership gap. No, it creates a massive power vacuum right at the heart of the movement. And it forces this huge, fundamental question. Who's going to carry the torch now? And there's no simple, obvious answer for who fills that vacuum. Instead, what we're seeing is two potential heirs emerge, and they each represent a totally different path forward, each with its own logic, and of course, its own set of risks. And this is where it gets really interesting. On one hand, you've got Tarcísio de Freitas. He's the pragmatist. He's the popular governor of São Paulo, which is Brazil's economic engine. People see him as a competent manager, and the polls show he's the strongest challenger against the current president, Lula. But on the other hand, you have Flávio Bolsonaro. He's the loyalist. As Jair Bolsonaro's oldest son, his candidacy is all about legacy, about making sure the Bolsonaro brand and its power stays locked firmly within the family. So the strategy that's being floated is to get behind Flávio, but why? Why would you pick the candidate who, at least on paper, seems way less likely to win? Well, the logic here, according to the strategists, isn't about a simple, straight-up victory. Oh no, it's a much more complicated game than that. Okay, the whole strategy, and I mean the entire thing, hangs on how Brazil's two-round election system works. If no single candidate gets more than 50% of the vote in round one, the top two go to a runoff. And the thinking here is that having a divided field in the first round isn't actually a weakness. It's something you can exploit. So here's how it breaks down. Step 1 is just about locking down the diehard base. Step 2, that's the power play. You basically force other right-wing candidates to either join you or risk being blamed for re-electing their biggest enemy, Lula's party, the PT. Then, step 3, this is the real pivot. Even if Flávio doesn't make it to the second round, that solid chunk of voters, say 20%, becomes this huge bargaining chip. He becomes a kingmaker. And that, of course, leads to step 4, making absolutely sure the family's ideology stays at the very center of any future conservative government, no matter who's sitting in the president's chair. So here's the bottom line. The main goal might not actually be to win the 2026 election. The real prize is to keep control over the entire conservative movement in Brazil for years and years to come. It's a strategy that puts long-term influence way ahead of a short-term win. Okay, so that's the strategy. On paper, it sounds kind of clever, right? But how does this brilliant theory actually hold up when you put it up against the hard data and the political reality on the ground? The whole theory, as we've seen, is built on this one magic number, 20%. It's the belief that if Flávio can just secure that big a chunk of the vote, it'll be enough to make him the ultimate kingmaker in a runoff. And this is where the strategy just hits a brick wall. Just look at the data. The whole gamble relies on Flávio hitting that 20% mark to be a kingmaker. But as these polls show, he's falling way, way short of that. You can see Lula has a huge lead, and Tarcísio is a really strong competitor. Flávio, though, he's struggling. The numbers just aren't there to back up the idea that he can command this decisive block of voters. And it's not just the polling numbers. The strategy seems to be ignoring some pretty major headwinds. First off, Flávio's rejection rate is through the roof, which makes it incredibly hard to win over new voters. He's also tied to these long-running corruption investigations, the rachadinhas, which are basically allegations of salary skimming. And of course, a lot of people just see this move as straight-up nepotism. But the biggest risk of all, instead of uniting the right, this strategy could completely fracture it, pretty much handing an easy victory to their opponents. So let's zoom out for a second. What are the bigger lessons here? What does this one strategic choice tell us about the larger forces that are shaping Brazilian politics today? Honestly, this one decision tells us so much. It shows how Brazil's election system can lead to these complex, super high risk moves. It highlights this deep identity crisis on the right, which is totally caught between ideological loyalty and the practical need to just win an election. It's a raw display of a family trying to turn its political influence into permanent control. And finally, it pretty much confirms that the deep political divide between Bolsonarismo and the PT, well, it's not going anywhere. In fact, this whole strategy depends on it. So at the end of the day, we're left with this one big question. Is this Flavio Gambit a brilliant masterstroke for long-term control, a clever way to play the system? Or is it a desperate gamble based on bad data that could not only cost the right wing the presidency, but shatter the entire movement for good? I guess only the next 2 years will tell.